What's going on, guys? This is Tower number 9, and here we have a game between myself and Endless again. And this time I am running a Luke Skywalker aggression build using Tarkentown there. And I'm testing out the new cards Moment of Peace and Force Throw, which were recently previewed, and which may have given Aggression Luke some more gas for trying to hold off aggro. So in the past, I felt that Luke Skywalker was not really able to do Luke Skywalker was not really able to hold off the more aggressive builds um, after a lot of cards came out that buffed aggro. And honestly, this is kind of worrying because if you think about the traditional if you think about the traditional card game archetypes, Luke is typically a mid-range deck, and mid-range is the way that the traditional relationship works is that mid-range decks are advantaged against aggro, but disadvantaged against control. Aggro beats control, but loses to mid-range. Control beats mid-range, loses to aggro. Um, so, however, mid-range was struggling a bit with aggro in such a good position, or at least Luke mid-range was. So the two decks normally considered mid-range were Luke and Boba, in terms of like competitive decks that would normally be considered in that archetype. And of those two, Boba's actually been doing okay against aggro. Boba doesn't feel like Boba is in a terrible place against aggro at all. But Luke has been struggling. I was doing some testing earlier, trying to get a Luke build, trying to get green Luke, which I think for a while was maybe the strongest build, and couldn't really find out how to make that a composition that would reliably work against an opponent using Leia or Sabine. Um, but you know, now things may have changed. I tried green Luke. I think I tried blue Luke. I think I tried red Luke. It seemed like Luke was didn't have what it took in that situation, but like I said, things might have changed. Let's see how this goes. So, early on, I play a Spec Force Soldier and shield it with Luke's ability. My opponent plays a Partisan Insurgent. On this second turn, Endless plays the Falcon, and I shoot it down with open fire, then knock the shield off uh, my Spec Force Soldier by attacking the Partisan Insurgent and getting in position to potentially defeat it. So thus far, I feel like this is actually going decently well. My opponent's Partisan Insurgent can deal 3 damage with an attack, but only if there is another red unit on the board, and currently there is not. So this is a scenario where the early damage just isn't really coming in for my opponent. Another attack, they're only doing 1 damage. I decided to entrench my Spec Force Soldier. So the reason that I'm doing this is because Sabine can deploy this turn. So by making this Spec Force Soldier into a 5/5, I am ready to attack and defeat her as soon as she deploys. Um, this also potentially suppresses other units that he might want to play. Just trying to get a big threat on there that Sabine does not necessarily want to deal with. Now, if my opponent has like a waylay, for instance, could send the Spec Force Soldier back and bounce the by bouncing the unit, the attachment would or the upgrade would be defeated. But in this situation, it ends up actually being another Partisan Insurgent that gets played. So now I'm going to play a Restored Arc 170. Endless spends 1 to play another Spec Force Soldier. I am going to have my Spec Force Soldier attack and defeat the Partisan Insurgent. The reason that I'm doing it in this order is because I could like pass until Sabine deploys and then attack and defeat Sabine, assuming that she does deploy. But my opponent could also just take the initiative at that phase. I would rather clear out a existing unit that can already swing for 3 and then take the initiative and be in a position to potentially defeat Sabine or one of these other units on my next turn. So Sabine used her ability to hit both bases for 1, then deployed and swung in for 3. That being said, I'm overall pretty happy with how little damage that I've taken thus far in this game. I think the situation could be a whole lot worse. And I do think that I made one substantial misplay though, which is that I should have used Tarkin Town to defeat the wounded Partisan Insurgent after my opponent deployed the Spec Force Soldier. My hope had been that I could prevent him from having a red card in play along with the Partisan Insurgent, but when my opponent had another small unit to go along with Sabine, it seemed like that was unlikely. Should have used Tarkentown at that point to clear it out, would have saved me 3 damage here. Um, so I deploy Yoda. My opponent has a Fleet Lieutenant to send the Spec Force Soldier in for 4 damage. Um, so here I could attack with my Restored Arc to deal 2 damage to Endless's base and heal my base for 1, but I actually prefer to take the initiative. Endless deploys a Green Squadron A-Wing. I have Super Luke there, who is going to be hopefully helpful in future turns. So what I can do here is I have several options. So first off, I can attack and remove. I also probably should have Tarkentown that turn also. Just getting that Partisan Insurgent off the field would be useful. I'm taking unnecessary damage here. I know it's not like the flashiest use of Tarkentown, but I think it would have been advantageous for me to do this. Um, but we'll see what happens. Depending on what my opponent does, I'm going to be able to remove at least one of these units here. So for instance, if my opponent attacks with a ground unit, I can have the A-Wing, I can use a Fleet Lieutenant to have the Restored Arc kill the A-Wing. So my opponent has the Fleet Lieutenant attack and defeat Yoda. I am going to go ahead and use my own Fleet Lieutenant to have my Restored Arc defeat the A-Wing, healing my base by 1. One good thing that Luke has going for him is a lot of restore and other healing effects. So you have, restored Arc and Yoda have some restore. Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight has restore 3. If you're playing green Luke, you have home 1, which has heavy restore and gives restore to your other units. Kanan's ability restores, even though a little bit of a different route. Here, my opponent deploys the Falcon. I'm going to open fire on it again, taking that Falcon off the board. Luckily, I think Endless may have mismanaged this a little bit because he's now found that Partisan Insurgent is attacking but no longer has a red card, another red unit in play to give it the buff. I have the the entrenched Spec Ops soldier takes down the Partisan Insurgent. Endless takes the initiative. I'm going to go ahead and deploy Luke. And I will have Luke attack, defeating the Fleet Lieutenant and shielding my Restored Arc. So this is now looking pretty good. I feel like I have the ground arena feels pretty under control here, and the space arena is also the space arena also has a strong option available. So all things considered, I think this has gone pretty well. Doesn't seem like I'm in too much danger necessarily. Still have 14 life on the base. Yoda was defeated, so I don't have the heavy healing, but Endless calls the game there, so that's going to be a win for Aggression Luke against the Sabine aggro there. And those open fires from Red were quite important in allowing me to deal with those Falcons efficiently. We had two Falcons and 2 open fires. So now I'm doing a little sideboarding here. So looking at these cards, I have Repair in the sideboard to shore up the aggro matchup further. I also have some kind of heavier cards. So there's 2 of those Redemption Medical Frigates in there. There's also some Vanquishes for if I'm playing against a deck that has some of those bigger heavy hitter units. Doing a little sideboarding there. Now it's on to game 2. This time Endless will be going first. I have a very bad opening hand. No unit that I can play on the first turn. I do have 12 turn 1 plays in this deck, but I didn't draw any of them there. Resourcing up. Looks like I'll be leading off with the Restored Arc. Endless plays a Cantina Braggart, 1 cost 0/3 with Raid 2, and then also backs him up with Benthic 2 Tubes, 1 cost 2/2. And when he attacks, he may give another red unit Raid 2 until the end of the round. Really scary. Not something that I want to see on the other side of the board. So here, one thing that I could do is Fleet Lieutenant my Restored Arc into the base for 4 damage, also healing 1 to my base. My base hasn't taken any damage. That part of it would be wasted. I could just attack with the Restored Arc, but as much as I hate to say it, I think my best play here may end up being getting Benthic 2 Tubes off the field with open fire. So two tubes could have been 2 damage to my base plus another 2 damage from a buff on the Cantina Braggart. So removing him is something that I'm pretty happy about, quite frankly. We then see the Cantina Braggart swing for 2, Restored Arc hits Endless's base for 2 while healing my base for 1. Endless deploys a Partisan Insurgent and uses Sabine's ability, hitting both bases for 1. Up to the 4 resource turn, so I have 2 main options here. One of them is to use Takedown on Sabine as soon as she is deployed. The other one is to play K2SO. Of the two, I think I actually prefer playing K2SO. While Takedown can be used to defeat Sabine immediately, I'm not actually sure that that's often necessarily the best route, because if my opponent does the rest of the turn before deploying Sabine, I do Takedown on Sabine, I end up losing the initiative, whereas if I go for K2, I can potentially have K2 defeat Sabine using the Fleet Lieutenant, or just have K2 fighting with those units, depending on how exactly it works out. And that seems like something that might be a better option for me. Endless plays a Spark of Rebellion, looking at my hand and choosing a card to discard, and ends up choosing the takedown here. So based on my previous discussion, I actually would rather have K2 than takedown. So I am not too unhappy with that choice. I'm just going to go ahead and play K2. Um, but I mean, the takedown would have also been at least some value, but we'll see. So then my opponent swings in with a Partisan Insurgent, inflicting 3 damage on the base because there is another aggression unit on the board. Cantina Braggart then does 1. Sabine does 1 damage to each base using her leader ability, and then goes ahead and swings in for 3 more. Additionally, Endless plays a Green Squadron A-Wing. So a lot of scary stuff on the field now for Endless. We're gonna see what we can do in order to get we're going to see what we can do in order to try and stabilize this board. It's definitely looking rougher for me than the previous game here, but it's not over. I'm thinking about my options. Unfortunately, I have 4 3-cost cards in hand here. I'd prefer to have a 3-cost and a 2-cost or something. Or I'm sorry, I have 3 3-cost cards and the Entrenched, which I may or may not want to actually play here. Um, so the main question is which of the 3 costs I want to play. Luckily, I can use Luke's ability to shield the 3-cost unit that I play if I would rather do that than play the Entrenched. Little area where Luke's ability can get some extra value if you do end up playing a bit below your curve. End up resourcing the Wing Leader here. I'm going to bring out Red 3, so he gives heroic units +1 or +1 power when attacking. Uh, every other, yeah, so he has raid 1. This unit gains +1 power while attacking and gives every other friendly heroic unit raid 1. So Endless goes for a wing leader buffing his A wing. Um, this does give me an interesting opportunity, which is that I can actually have K2 attack and clear out the Partisan Insurgent, also doing 1 damage to my opponent's base because he has Overwhelm, and I have the extra 1 damage from Red 3 on the field. The reason that I attack the Partisan Insurgent is because Partisan Insurgent can swing for 3, Sabine can also swing for 3, but if I attack and defeat Sabine, my opponent will gain Sabine leader in future turns and be able to do that guaranteed 1 damage to each base. So if I defeat the Partisan Insurgent rather than defeating Sabine, I have also removed 3 damage this turn, but I do not yet give my opponent that recurring 1 damage to each base, which could potentially defeat me. The Green Squadron A-Wing goes ahead and swings into my base, hitting it for a mighty 5 damage, only 10 HP left for me. I'm thinking about my options. So one thing that I can do here is I could have my Restored Arc take out my opponent's wing leader, but I actually have the Restored Arc attack into the buffed. I'm going to have the Restored Arc attack into the buffed A-wing instead, inflicting 3 damage with the buff from Red 3. My opponent erroneously puts 2 damage on there, but it doesn't really matter because I immediately Tarkentown to get that thing off the board. The Cantina Braggart hits my base for 2, and Sabine hits my base for 3 more. I only have 6 life remaining, which means I could actually be defeated in 1 move. If my opponent has a surprise strike with Sabine Wren, that could be the game. However, Luke is about to get a chance to deploy, and perhaps I will be able to stabilize in this phase. I do see the powerful Force Throw in hand. This is one of the cards that I have been excited about. So this is a Force Throw is a 1-cost card, and you your opponent chooses and discards a card. And then if you have a force unit, you may deal damage to an enemy unit equal to the cost of that card. This is really strong because not only are you removing an option from your opponent's hand, but you're also doing some major damage if you have a force unit. So I lead off by having K2 attack and defeat Sabine. That +1 from red 3, allowing him to hit at strength 5. My opponent immediately uses Jeddah City on red 3, removing its attack, so it will not be able to deal with that. It will not be able to deal with that wing leader. So in this situation, I'm going to deploy Luke, 4/7 on attack, give a shield to a friendly unit. The Cantina Braggart hits my base for 2. Then I'm going to do the Force Throw. So the Force Throw will force my opponent to discard a card. Because Luke is a Force unit, I will then be able to deal damage to a unit equal to the cost of the discarded card. And unless my opponent has a 0-cost Metal Ceremony, any card that he discards will allow me to deal at least 1 damage and remove the 1 HP Wing Leader before it has a chance to attack my base. My opponent removes a red 3, so 3 damage to that wing leader. It is off the board. This is something that I'm very happy to see here. Endless takes the initiative. The Luke Skywalker takes down the Cantina Braggart, shielding my red 3 while he's at it. I then play out Kanan. I do not attack with red 3 because it has -4 this turn, so it can't do any damage. However, Jeddah City is now worn off, and I have a fair amount of damage on the board here. So if I attack the enemy base with all units, I could deal 5 damage from Kanan, 5 damage from Luke, 5 damage from K2, so that's 15, plus 3 uh, my my red 3 for 18, 18 total damage, which would actually be lethal here, if I just go all out for the face. My opponent plays Sabine. I am maybe being overly cautious here by attacking my opponent's units. So, Kanan, I almost said Cassian, I almost said K2, but Kanan attacks and defeats Sabine. My opponent mills a card, and it causes a heal for 2 for me. Endless then plays a Partisan Insurgent. I'm going to play another Force Throw, so Endless has to discard a card. In this case, it is a 3-cost, red 3, so we're going to go ahead and deal 3 damage to the Partisan Insurgent. That should be exhausted also if he has put it into play ready, but it is not ready. It is exhausted. I am then going to be able to attack it with K2. So I get the overwhelm damage. Only 1 point of damage was needed to actually defeat the Partisan Insurgent. The rest goes to the base. And I'm going to choose to use K2's ability to cause a discard, discarding my opponent's last card, which is a Surprise Strike. And then my remaining units are going to swing in. So 5 damage to the base from Luke, and then 3 damage to the base from red 3, and now I am in a very good looking situation. The main thing that my opponent could have to beat me here would be Falcon plus Surprise Strike exactly, and Endless shows his hand, does not have it, and that's going to be another win for Aggression Luke. It's possible that I should have just pushed to try to close the game a turn earlier here, but that strategy does have the downside that my opponent could potentially cause me a lot of problems if, for instance, before I was able to close the game, he played some kind of exhaust effect and had a unit on board that I hadn't dealt with. It would potentially be a moment of weakness for me. Didn't end up happening, of course. So another win there, and we are going to do round 3. So let's go on and see how that one goes. So right now, I'm feeling pretty good about Aggression Luke's ability to deal with Sabine. I will say that Endless is not as experienced on Sabine as some players, so I do think that it is possible that the top Sabine players or whatever are going to be able to come up with something that can get through the problems and or can solve the problems and have answers to the issues posed by this sort of Luke deck. However, I do feel that Red Luke is in a pretty good spot against Sabine, at least based on these games thus far. We'll have to do some more testing, see how it goes. Okay. Endless will be going first this time, so we're going to see a Partisan Insurgent as the starting unit. I'm going to start off with a Spec Force Soldier. And then Endless takes the initiative, and I'm going to go ahead and use Luke's ability to give a shield. I think it might have been advantageous for Endless to use Sabine's ability for 1 damage to each base. I am then forced to choose whether I want to shield or take the initiative myself. Um, but this, because the thing is, so taking the initiative with a Partisan Insurgent isn't that good, because you want to play another unit anyway before it attacks. With some units, it would be reasonable to take the initiative so that you could guaranteed attack before I potentially take you out with a fleet lieutenant or whatever, but that's not the case here. So here my opponent plays a Cantina Braggart for 1. Plays the partisan, has the partisan insurgent surprise strike the base, doing 6 damage. Um, I had played red 3, and then my spec force soldier is going to attack and defeat the Cantina Braggart thanks to the +1 from red 3. So red 3, very useful buff there. Sabine's ability used, 1 damage to each base. I'm going to take the initiative. Mm. So at this point, I can play Kanan, which is very strong. I have these copies of Repair in hand, which are nice to have. These are sideboard cards. I am not main decking Repair, but it is a sideboard card that helps deal with aggro. I'm going to lead off with an attack from red 3, inflicting 3 damage on the opposing base. I do have a takedown that can potentially just kill Sabine, so that's a nice little thing to have there. I go ahead and inflict 3 damage on my opponent's partisan insurgent, losing my shield in the process. That's going to be a swing for 3 damage. I erroneously did 4 damage, but then remembered that the red 3 does not buff the partisan insurgent because the partisan insurgent is not heroic. I'm then going to bring out Kanan. I would rather do that than go for the takedown play on Sabine. This way, Sabine is going to be able to deploy and hit my base, but I don't have all the passing and awkwardness, and because I have the initiative, I will be able to deal with the situation pretty quickly. I have taken quite a bit of damage to the base, but I have these repairs waiting. So I'm going to lead off. The highest priority attack here, I think, is actually not necessarily to clear Sabine. I think the highest priority attack may be to clear my opponent's red 3, which is buffing Sabine, and is, if not killed, could attack and kill my red 3 instead. My opponent plays a Spark of Rebellion, and I reveal Takedown, 2 repairs, and a Restored Arc. Takedown is removed. I then have Kanan attack and defeat Sabine, thanks to the buff from red 3. Red 3 really paying off this game. My opponent mills I believe that is actually also a red 3, so 2 points of healing to my base. And I'm feeling pretty good about this now. The Partisan Insurgent is not in a great spot. A Wing Leader comes out to buff the Partisan Insurgent, giving him +2 experience, and then my once again red 3 pays off as I swing in for 6 or for 3, but with the 3 damage already on him, it goes to 6, clearing that unit. And I think that's the third time that the +1 power from red 3 has allowed me to defeat a unit that I would otherwise not be able to. I believe it allowed the Spec Force Soldier to defeat the opponent's Cantina Braggart. It then allowed Spec Force Keenan to defeat Sabine, and now it's allowed the Spec Force Soldier to defeat the Partisan Insurgent as well. So good show to red 3. I bring out a Restored Arc and throw a shield on it. And this turn, I will be able to deploy Luke, and things are really looking pretty good in terms of stabilization. My opponent is ahead, um, but I also played out a repair there, getting me a little further away from the real danger zone here. Red Luke has a lot of healing and stabilization on offer. K2SO shows up. I'm going to go ahead and have my shielded restored arc attack and defeat the wing leader there, losing the shield, and but also repairing my base for 1. Jeddah City used on Keenan. I'm going to have Keenan attack the enemy base for 0 in order to cause his on attack ability to go off, and so that will be a card milled from hand. This will also allow me I'm sorry, I said a card milled from hand. It's milled from the top of the deck, of course. That's what milling actually is. But because that card is milled, I do get to heal my base a bit. In that case, I believe only healing for one. You don't always get the double heal, but even healing for one is nice. Endless has taken the initiative here, so I'm going to be able to. Oh, and it does actually do one damage as well because I would hit for 4 - 4 = 0, but I have that +1 once again from my good old red 3. So then I have Luke deployed. Luke will defeat K2. K2's when defeated effect deals 3 damage to my base. I will have Luke shield Kanan, and in a funny twist, I then play my only card, which is a repair. So that was actually a situation where, regardless of which option was chosen for K2, it basically would have been 3 damage to the base either way, because either 3 damage is inflicted and then healed, or my opponent removes the repair that would allow me to heal 3 from the original total. And at this point, I believe Endless actually concedes. I am very stabilized, and we'll probably close out the game in the next turn or two. So, yeah, you know, these were pretty encouraging test results after I had been kind of struggling with Luke against aggro. I felt like the red Luke was more able to deal with aggro than the green Luke that I had been playing earlier, and the addition of Force Throw, which seems like a really good card, was very strong as well. Moment of Peace, I don't think I actually played it in any of these games. I did have it in the deck, but I don't think I actually played the card. Does seem like a potentially good card. This might not be the matchup for it, but does seem like a potentially good card. And yeah, very interesting situation. Ultimately, I think this could be a mid-range deck that actually has the power to hold off aggro, unlike some of the earlier League versions. And the question is whether you can have a decent enough matchup against some of the later game builds and other mid-range decks for it to be a deck worth playing. However, this is certainly an encouraging sign for Luke, who I think was struggling a little bit. Um, Prior to this forced throw reveal and some of the other stuff, I was honestly considering bumping Luke down to B tier in my rolling tier list because he seemed to be really struggling against these aggro decks that are very prevalent. But maybe he has something that can maybe he has something that can hold him off with this new aggression build. I'm not saying for sure. I would need to do a lot more testing to state that confidently, but I think this is certainly an encouraging result. Okay, so that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thanks to you all for watching. GG's to Endless. And I will catch you guys later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. If you want to check out the Aggression Luke deck that I was testing with, the deck list is in the video description below. Thanks again, guys. And yeah, I'll catch you guys later.